August 28, 2003, Erie, Pennsylvania. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon around 2:30 p.m. when a balding, middle-aged man wearing a white t-shirt and holding a small cane in his right hand walked into the PNC Bank just off Peach Street. His name was Brian Wells, 46 years old, and he looked like someone who could have been your neighbor. A pizza delivery guy, maybe. Nothing out of the ordinary, until you noticed the strange bulge beneath the collar of his shirt. Brian approached a female bank teller at the counter, his face tense. He slid a small handwritten note across the desk. The note read, "Gather all employees who know the vault combination. Put $250,000 in a bag. No die packs. No tricks." Then, with trembling fingers, Brian lifted his shirt slightly to reveal a strange contraption strapped tightly around his neck, a bulky metal collar with a locked box beneath it. His voice was low, almost pleading, as he added, "They said it's a bomb. They'll blow me up if you don't do it." The teller, visibly shaken, stammered, "The vault can't be opened right now. Only $8,702 is in the drawers." She gathered the available cash, stuffed it into a bag, and handed it over. Brian gave a forced chuckle, nervous, robotic, and turned toward the exit. He shuffled out, his posture stiff, got on his beat-up white Geo Metro, and drove off. He didn't get far. Roughly 15 minutes later, police surrounded Brian in the parking lot of a nearby eyeglass store. Guns drawn, they shouted commands. Brian, looking utterly terrified, dropped to his knees, hands in the air. They cuffed him quickly. "I was delivering pizza when some guys jumped me," Brian blurted. "Black guys. They had guns. They put this thing on me. Said it'll explode if I don't rob the bank." The bomb squad was immediately called. Officers kept their distance, rifles trained on him, hiding behind vehicles. Brian sat cross-legged on the pavement, breathing heavily. He kept glancing around, agitated. "Have you called my boss?" he asked at one point, almost childishly, as if worried about being fired for skipping a shift. "He's gonna think I ran off." Then a faint beeping noise began to emanate from the device on his chest. Beep, beep, beep. Panic set in. Brian's eyes widened. He screamed, twisting and trying to lean away from the collar, but it was tight, unmovable. "It's beeping! Oh God, it's gonna blow!" And then, boom! The device detonated. It tore through his chest, flinging blood and shrapnel across the pavement. Brian Wells collapsed backward, convulsed once, and died right there on the spot, his lifeless eyes staring up at the gray sky above. It was 3:20 p.m. The bomb squad arrived 3 minutes later, just too late. Investigators launched into action. They searched his car and discovered a bizarre handmade cane, 2 feet long and rigged like a shotgun. It was a functional, crude firearm. Even more disturbing were the bomb components. The collar was made of heavy metal, with 4 keyholes and a 13-digit combination lock. Attached to it was a metal box containing 2 6-inch pipes filled with an unknown explosive powder. The whole mechanism had clearly been constructed by someone with technical skills. Kitchen timers, wires, electronic boards. It looked like something out of a nightmare, a DIY project built by a deranged engineer. Then came the most chilling discovery. The handwritten notes found in Brian's car, multiple pages written in neat capital letters, addressed directly to Brian. "You have been fitted with a bomb collar. Robbed the bank of $250,000. After that, follow the clues exactly. Each clue leads to a key or code to unlock the device. Failure to comply will result in detonation." There were diagrams, maps, equations, an entire 6 scavenger hunt. The final lines in the note were cold, emotionless. "There is only one way to survive. Do as you are told. Think later. Act now, or die." Brian Wells had been caught in a twisted game he had no way of winning. But the story didn't start at the bank. It began that same morning around 11 a.m. Brian worked as a delivery man for Mamma Mia's Pizzeria. That morning, he'd taken 2 sausage and pepperoni pies and a Diet Coke out for delivery to a remote location on the outskirts of Erie, a dirt road behind a TV tower, far from prying eyes. It was supposed to be a quick job. But when he arrived, several people, faces obscured, were waiting. They ambushed him, forced the bomb collar over his neck, shoved a cane gun in his hands, and gave him the instructions. They told him he would die if he didn't do exactly as they said. They used him like a puppet. The next morning, a reporter from the Eerie Times visited the location with a photographer. Police had cordoned off the entire area. The grass was trampled. A few scattered pizza boxes lay discarded. A man emerged from a nearby house. He introduced himself as Bill Rothstein, 59 years old, soft-spoken and friendly. He lived alone in the large brick house that overlooked the TV tower, the very spot where Brian had been ambushed. Rothstein spoke politely, offering the journalist vague observations. Didn't hear much yesterday. Quiet day, but something about him felt off. Too calm, too practiced. 3 weeks later, on September 20th, Rothstein made a chilling 911 call. "I have something you'll want to see," he said. "There's a body in my freezer." He gave his address, 8645 Peach Street, just a few miles from the bomb site. When police arrived, they discovered the frozen corpse of a woman, Marjorie Deal Armstrong's ex-boyfriend. Rothstein claimed she had killed him, and he'd panicked hiding the body. But the more they questioned Rothstein, the more things unraveled. He knew more than he let on. A lot more. By the time the investigation closed, Brian Wells was dead, and the story that emerged was one of manipulation, madness, and a meticulously planned crime. One thing was clear: Brian hadn't been just a random delivery guy. He was chosen, played, used, and the game cost him his life. Certainly. Here's the rewritten version of that final part in English, with enhanced realism, natural dialogue, psychological suspense, character backstory, and immersive detail, maintaining the original word count. For several days he'd been in deep distress. The weight of it all had pushed him to the brink of suicide. In fact, he had already written a suicide note, which police later found at his home. In the letter, Rothstein apologized to those who had cared for him, saying, "I've left something in the freezer in my garage. It's Jim. This isn't some prank. And I didn't kill him. I had nothing to do with his death." He ended the letter with a strange insistence. "This has nothing to do with the collar bomb case." But the truth unraveled quickly. In the days following, Rothstein couldn't understand, or pretended not to understand, how Jim's body had ended up in his freezer. According to him, it all started in August, when he received a call from his ex-girlfriend, Marjorie Deal Armstrong. They'd had a tumultuous relationship in the late 60s and early 70s, but nothing could have prepared him for what she asked. She told him bluntly that she had shot her boyfriend, Jim Roden, twice in the head with a shotgun during a fight. "Over money. I need your help," she'd said. "You've got to help me clean up the house and get rid of the body." Marjorie lived about 10 miles from Rothstein, and even though he claimed he was reluctant, he did exactly what she asked. He stored Jim's body in his garage freezer for 5 full weeks. Later, he confessed to slowly dismembering it and scattering the remains across different parts of the city. But he hadn't followed Marjorie's instructions perfectly. He didn't want to desecrate the body more than necessary, and that hesitation would prove fateful. Paranoid and racked with guilt, Rothstein finally called 911, telling police there was a dead man in his freezer. He was scared, terrified of what Marjorie might do to him if he didn't come forward. September 1st, the very next day after Rothstein's call, police arrested Marjorie Deal Armstrong. 6 months later, in January, she was found guilty. Due to her history of mental illness, she was sentenced to 20 years in a psychiatric prison. During questioning, she admitted more than anyone expected. She confessed to supplying kitchen timers for the bomb used in the collar case. She claimed she'd even been nearby when the bank robbery happened. But the biggest twist came when she revealed that Brian Wells, the pizza delivery man, wasn't an innocent victim. According to her, he had been involved in the plan from the beginning. Wells, she said, had agreed to the robbery, but he thought the bomb was fake. He was wrong. She told investigators that the real mastermind behind the plan was Bill Rothstein, the same man who had stored Jim's body in his freezer, who had pretended to be just a good Samaritan trying to help police. She said Rothstein had manipulated everything and everyone, and in accusing her, he had only entangled himself further. Even before her confession, suspicions around Rothstein's role in the collar bomb had been growing. But by 2005, yet another twist emerged. Another man came forward, a television repairman named Kenneth Barnes. He was an old friend of Marjorie's. They used to go fishing together. According to him, she had shared the entire plan with him. Fearing a long prison sentence, Barnes agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. He confessed that they had planned the robbery together to raise money Marjorie needed to pay a hitman to kill her father. In exchange for full cooperation, Barnes received a reduced sentence. He explained how Wells had been recruited under false pretenses. He thought the bomb was a prop. He never expected it to be real. But the moment he put on that collar, his fate was sealed. And it was Rothstein, Barnes said, who had built the bomb. In 2008, Rothstein, though already dead, was officially named responsible for designing and assembling the bomb. Investigators called it one of the most complex homemade explosive devices they'd ever seen. He'd built it with layers of traps and fake clues, all intended to confuse, stall, and mislead authorities. Barnes was sentenced to 45 years in prison for his role in the robbery and the murder plot. He later agreed to testify against Marjorie in hopes of a sentence reduction. The biggest mystery remained unanswered. Was the robbery just a cover-up for Jim Roden's murder? Or was the murder committed just to keep someone quiet about the robbery? No one knows for sure, and that's what makes this case so chilling. This wasn't just a bank robbery. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, misdirection, and murder. One that still leaves investigators haunted to this day. A real-life horror story stranger than fiction. Montreal Museum Heist. A chilling retelling. It was the dead of night, September 4th, 1972. Montreal's streets lay quiet under a thin veil of fog, save for the occasional bark of a stray dog echoing off the old stone buildings. A man, clad in dark climbing gear, moved like a shadow between the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts and the towering St. Paul's Church. With calm precision, he began scaling a large tree that stood between the two buildings. His goal, the museum roof. Perched atop the roof minutes later, he dropped a long, coiled rope down the side. Below, two other men stood in silence watching. They nodded, and one of them whispered in French, "C'est bon, vas-y." The rope snaked downward. One by one, they climbed. Their movements were confident, too confident to be amateurs. A skylight on the roof had been under repair. It was their way in. Fortunately for them, the cameras near the skylight had been shut down due to the ongoing maintenance. Slipping inside with almost ghost-like quiet, they entered the museum. Inside, dim emergency lights flickered, casting warped shadows along the marble corridors. The thieves rappelled 15 meters down from the third floor using their rope and landed silently on the second floor. As they crept through the gallery halls, a soft rustle caught their attention. One of the night security guards, an older man named George Fournier, was in the kitchen preparing a late-night cup of coffee. He spotted them and froze, eyes wide in disbelief. "Stop right there." "What the hell?" he began. But one of the, intruders, a tall man with long, greasy hair and a woolen cap, raised a pistol and fired 2 rounds into the ceiling. The sound cracked through the museum like thunder. George stumbled backward, hands raised. Another guard, who had been doing rounds on the opposite side, came running, only to be quickly overpowered and tied up. Both guards were dragged to a small room on the first floor and locked in. One of them later told the police that the intruders had masked faces, spoke French and English, and carried firearms. He remembered one of them speaking fluent French, barking orders like a soldier. Another spoke English with a Montreal accent, and the third, whose face he never saw, spoke only French from the shadows. The heist was surgical. The thieves avoided any piece that might trigger an alarm, anything that had protective backing or sensors embedded in the canvas. Still, they managed to take what they could. 18 irreplaceable paintings, including works by Delacroix, Corot, and Bruegel. Along with the art, they stole 39 pieces of jewelry, some of them centuries old. The estimated loss? A staggering $2 million. It was morning when museum employee Charles Bensley arrived to open the gallery. The moment he stepped into the main exhibition hall, he knew something was off. Broken glass glinted on the floor. Display cases were shattered, canvas backs were ripped open, and the walls were scarred where masterworks once hung. They took The Corot, he whispered to himself in horror. Charles called the police immediately. Forensics noted faint footprints near the broken skylight and found a torn glove fragment, size large. They also found rope fibers and a scratched metal clasp that looked recently broken. A cigarette pack, with French warnings on the label, lay near the stairwell. One pendant from a stolen necklace had been dropped and crushed underfoot. The case made front-page news across Canada. "Midnight heist at Montreal Museum, $2 in art vanishes," screamed one headline. The precision and planning reminded some of a robbery from a few weeks earlier, in August 1972, where two masked men had tied up a homeowner, looted his estate, and escaped via a mountain trail using a boat. That heist, too, involved two French-speaking men and one English speaker. Initially, it was assumed the same group was involved, but later investigation determined the robberies were unrelated. In the days that followed, police questioned several local university students who were known to hang out with museum staff. Some were students from McGill, others from the École des Beaux-Arts. They probed for any hint of inside knowledge, but nothing came of it. No arrests were made. Investigators started to believe the job had an insider's touch. They interrogated every employee from curators to janitors. Still nothing. Then, in a 2010 interview, Vincent Jacquet, a now retired museum spokesperson, told true crime author David Skinner something chilling. If it was an inside job, it wasn't by the staff. But maybe, just maybe, it was someone from the maintenance crew working on the skylight. Jacquet recalled a strange call the museum director received days after the robbery. The voice was muffled male, with a faint Parisian accent. The caller claimed to know where one of the stolen items was. He instructed the director to visit a phone booth near McGill University and search a nearby trash bin. Inside was a broken cigarette pack, and tucked inside that a pendant. One of the stolen ones. Then came the brown envelope. In October 1972, a mysterious parcel arrived at the museum. Inside were Polaroid photographs of the stolen paintings, positioned as if to prove they were safe. Written across one photo in block letters was, "Lap of the Port of Montreal." Authorities couldn't tell if it was a taunt, a threat, or a clue. Rumors circulated that the West End Gang, a powerful Montreal crime syndicate, might have been involved. Not long after, the museum received a letter from the thieves. They wanted $500,000 in exchange for the safe return of the art. The museum, under pressure from law enforcement, agreed to set up a drop. The police sent in a negotiator carrying marked bills, but it was a setup. No one ever came to retrieve the money. No art was returned. To this day, the paintings remain missing. The jewelry, likely broken down and sold off in parts, vanished into black markets across Europe and North America. The Montreal Museum of Fine Arts still displays the empty frames, silent reminders of a heist that, half a century later, remains one of the most haunting unsolved crimes in Canadian history. And here is the rewritten horror crime story in realistic English, with immersive details, natural dialogue, and psychological suspense, keeping the original word count. A routine. Police cruiser, completely unaware of the ongoing heist operation, happened to pass right by the agreed meeting spot. The sight of flashing lights startled the thieves, throwing them into panic. The plan unraveled. They fled before completing the handoff. The next day, as if nursing a bruised ego, the thieves anonymously called the museum. Their tone was angry, hostile. They vented about the botched exchange and blamed the museum staff for the trap. Then, silence. For months, not a word. It was as if they had vanished. It wasn't until the summer of the following year, 1973, that the case stirred again. A member of the museum's board received a mysterious phone call. The voice on the other end claimed to know the whereabouts of the stolen paintings. Calm, articulate, and elusive, the caller didn't give a name. He simply said, "I can get them back, but it's going to cost you." Montreal's Point Real Insurance, desperate to recover what they had insured, got involved. The museum, in coordination with the insurance company, agreed to offer $10,000 if the paintings could be returned safely. The delivery was to be handled by a man named Deco, a staff liaison. He was calm, detail-oriented, Had a quiet life. No wife, no kids. Just a cat named Marcel, and a flat near Parc La Fontaine. The call was specific. Deco was to head out with a briefcase full of cash by 2 p.m. sharp. The instructions were precise, like something out of a spy novel. First stop, a dingy public phone booth downtown. It reeked of cigarette smoke, old chewing gum on the walls. As soon as Deco picked up the receiver, it rang. The caller gave him the next location, a phone booth near the Blue Bonnets racetrack, close to the Saint Laurent Boulevard and the Henri Bourassa Metro. The directions were deliberately convoluted. By 4 p.m., Deco had traveled across the city to several such payphones, growing more anxious each time. Finally, he was told to leave the cash-filled envelope beneath a battered metal sign on an empty plot near Saint-Martin Boulevard. His hands trembled as he crouched down to hide the envelope. Cars passed nearby. Every sound made him flinch. Next, he was ordered to walk to a phone booth near the Angrignon metro station. There, the final call would reveal where the paintings were hidden. Deco stood there, the receiver cold in his hand. No call came. He waited. Minutes turned to hours. The sky turned orange, then black. Still nothing. Defeated and paranoid, Deco returned to his office. He didn't sleep that night. Kept checking his window. Every creak of the old wood floors startled him. The next morning, at exactly 8:10 a.m., the museum received another call from the same elusive voice. This time, he claimed the paintings were in a hotel on Rue Berry, near the banking district. The building was immediately surrounded, searched top to bottom. Nothing, no paintings, no suspects, just cheap wallpaper and the lingering scent of bleach. That was the last trace of the thieves. The investigation dried up. Leads turned cold. The truth was bitter. They hadn't just stolen a few paintings. The thieves had been selective, careful. They took only the most valuable pieces. One of them, a painting by Rembrandt, was worth $175 million alone. Altogether, the stolen artwork was worth over $5 million. Even after 50 years, police still couldn't confirm exactly how many pieces were stolen, or who took them. The phone booth near Rue Saint-Hubert, where one call had originated, was long gone. The lot it stood on had become a parking structure. No evidence was ever recovered from the scene. No arrests were made. Not one suspect was charged. The trail had gone completely cold. The police did receive several tips over the years, but they were never followed up properly. Some misplaced, others ignored. Leads withered away before they could sprout into anything substantial. Records about the incident grew scarce, some even vanished. Decades passed. At this point, it was less a case and more a local legend. Many believe the stolen paintings were quietly sold off, perhaps in secret auctions across Europe. Others think they're hanging in the private hallways of the ultra-wealthy, hidden from the world. Most major auction houses have strict policies against selling known stolen art. When a stolen item resurfaces, it's typically returned to the insurance company, the legal owner post-claim. But this heist? It still stands as one of the most audacious unresolved art thefts in modern history. They say it was the greatest diamond heist in history, not just because of what was stolen, but how it was done. The crime stunned the world, and to this day, it's known as one of the most sophisticated thefts ever executed. It all went down in Antwerp, Belgium, on the night between February 15th and 16th, 2003. The vault, buried 2 floors beneath the Antwerp Diamond Center, was built like a fortress. We're talking infrared sensors, Doppler radar, seismic detectors, magnetic fields, and a lock with over 100 million possible combinations. There were cameras everywhere, and even a private security force patrolling the premises 24/7. And still, 5 men managed to break in. At the helm was Leonardo Notarbartolo, a seasoned Italian thief. Charismatic, clever, and manipulative, he had rented an office in the building months before, pretending to be a diamond dealer. He became a familiar face to security, even brought pastries for the guards. He was the inside man no one suspected. But Leo wasn't alone. His team was codenamed like characters out of a comic book. The Monster, a hulking brute of a man who handled the drilling, driving, and any muscle work. The genius, a silent electronics wizard. Nobody knew his real name. He built custom devices and improvised like no one else. The king of keys, a master locksmith with an eye for copying even the most complex locks. Speedy, the driver and lookout. Also Leo's longtime friend, though not the brightest in the bunch. Some say there was a sixth man, the one they killed. Days before the heist, the plan was set in motion. The genius had installed a tiny camera above the vault's main door. Disguised in a motion sensor casing, it fed video back to a transmitter hidden in a fire extinguisher they left in a nearby public hallway. Inside the extinguisher was a sealed, airtight chamber holding the electronics. While security thought everything was fine, the thieves watched. They studied the guards' routines, the patterns, every step. They rehearsed their moves in a warehouse back in Italy, built to perfectly replicate the vault. But there was one problem: the thermal motion sensors. If triggered, they'd set off the alarm instantly. That's where Leo came in. On February 14, posing as a tenant, he entered the vault area like he always did, but this time he sprayed the sensors with women's hairspray, the kind with fine oil particles. The spray formed a thin, invisible film over the sensor lenses, rendering them blind for a few hours. It was risky. It would only last one night. But that was all they needed. Midnight. Speedy parked the van in a back alley nearby, keeping an eye on police patrols. The rest of the crew entered a vacant office building next to the Diamond Center. Leo had made a duplicate key months earlier. The two buildings shared a garden, and from that garden a narrow balcony led straight to the Diamond Center's lower floors. They hoisted themselves up using a custom-built ladder, careful to avoid cameras. The genius had already taken care of the infrared sensor on the roof. He covered it with a polyester sheet stitched by hand to block the heat signature. From the balcony, they disabled a small alarm. For the external cameras, they used black plastic dinner plates. They simply covered the lenses while wearing gloves. Inside, they were ghosts. The vault door had a dual magnetic lock. It triggered an alarm if the circuit between the magnets was broken. The genius had a trick for that too. Aluminum plates with double-sided tape insulated with condoms to keep them static-free. He placed them carefully, keeping the magnets linked while opening the vault. The magnetic field stayed stable. The alarm never triggered. Then came the big challenge: the vault key. This was where the king of keys shone. Using surveillance footage and some crude sketches, he had created a copy of the foot-long vault key. But he wasn't sure it would work. That's when he remembered something. Guards always visited the restroom before opening the vault. One day he snuck into the empty washroom and spotted it, the actual key hanging on a hook behind the door. It was all he needed. He took quick measurements and returned it before anyone noticed. Back in the vault, he held his breath as he turned the replica key. Click. They were in. Inside, they found 123 safety deposit boxes, gold, diamonds, antique jewelry. It was all there. The team worked fast, cracking open box after box using drills and metal cutters, all muffled with foam padding. Leo checked his watch. 20 minutes left, he whispered. Wrap it up. They stuffed everything into duffel bags. Estimated take? Over 100 million, and then they were gone. They retraced their steps, replaced every plate, sealed every latch. The fire extinguisher, with the video device, vanished. No fingerprints, no broken alarms. It wasn't until Monday morning that anyone realized what had happened. The investigation that followed was massive, but mistakes had been made. Speedy, nervous and jittery, had tossed some trash in a nearby forest after the job. It included an empty sandwich wrapper, a receipt, and a partially burned piece of vellum paper with vault combinations. That forest led to a farmhouse. That farmhouse had been rented by Leonardo Notarbartolo. He was arrested 2 days later. But here's the twist. Authorities only ever recovered $1 million worth of jewels. The rest? Gone. Never found. And that sixth man? Some believe it was a greedy accomplice who tried to blackmail the crew. Leo, they say, took care of him the old-fashioned way, strangled him deep in the woods, and made sure the evidence burned with him. Others believe the genius disappeared, taking most of the loot with him. But no one knows for sure, because when you're dealing with ghosts, sometimes they vanish before you even know they were there. The Antwerp diamond heist of 2003 is still considered one of the most legendary jewel thefts in history. The heist took place on the night of February 15, 2003, at the Antwerp Diamond Center in Belgium. The stolen items, diamonds, gold, silver, and a variety of other valuable jewels, were worth an estimated $100 million. Despite arrests being made later, most of the stolen items were never recovered. The vault that held the treasure was located 2 floors below the main building. It had some of the most advanced security in the world at the time, featuring over 10 layers of protection, including multiple security cameras, a lock with 100 million possible combinations, infrared heat detectors, seismic sensors, Doppler radar, a magnetic field, and a private security team for the building and the neighborhood. The heist was pulled off by a team of 5 people, led by a man named Leonardo Notarbartolo, a professional thief who posed as a diamond merchant. He had rented an office in the Diamond Center 2 years prior and used it to gain access and familiarity with the building's security. Leonardo was eventually caught because of a crucial mistake. He had returned to the crime scene after the heist. Each member of the team had a role. One was known as the Monster, a muscular man who worked as an electrician, mechanic, and driver. Another was the Genius, an expert in electronics who played a key role in disabling the alarm systems. His identity remains unknown to this day. A third was Speed, a nervous but agile accomplice. And then there was the King of Keys, a master locksmith who managed to recreate a nearly impossible vault key. To pull off the heist, the team hid a tiny camera above the vault door by disguising it as part of the ceiling light. This camera recorded the combination code entered by guards, and the footage was wirelessly transmitted to a hidden receiver inside a modified fire extinguisher that they had placed in a nearby storage unit. Over the course of months, the crew studied the guards' routines, practiced opening a replica vault they had built from memory, and carefully planned every move. An inside man, possibly unknowingly, helped them by spraying the thermal motion sensors with a special hair product. The oil-based spray created a transparent film that temporarily blocked the sensors from detecting movement or heat signatures. While this effect only lasted a few hours, it gave the thieves enough time to deactivate the sensors entirely using more permanent methods. On the night of the robbery, Leonardo sat in a parked car outside the building to monitor police radio frequencies. All 5 thieves wore plastic gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. The group had earlier crafted a duplicate key to a vacant office adjacent to the Diamond Center, which shared a common garden with it. Since the empty office had no security cameras, it gave them safe entry. From there, they used a ladder to climb into a small balcony that led directly to the vault floor. An infrared sensor was mounted on the roof, but the Genius used a homemade polyester sheet to mask it. He also disabled a balcony alarm and blacked out external cameras with dark plastic trays so the crew could work under minimal light. One of the most complex security features was the magnetic field created by the vault door, designed to trigger an alarm if the door was opened without authorization. To bypass it, they used an aluminum plate with double-sided tape and wedged it between the magnetic contacts using condoms to hold it in place. This tricked the sensor into thinking the door was still sealed. The King of Keys had earlier crafted a replica of the vault's master key. He had found the real one hanging in the open washroom area during one of the guards' visits and memorized its details. Before the heist, he decided to copy it without telling anyone, ensuring that no one would know a second key existed unless Leonardo was caught and revealed the secret. The crew turned off all nearby lights to avoid triggering light-sensitive sensors and worked in pitch blackness. They used red light torches intermittently, only to verify their positions. At one point, the boss carefully removed the insulation from a wire running to the vault's main alarm system, then looped in a dummy wire to keep the circuit intact even if a sensor was tripped. This effectively disabled the alarm system without triggering it. By 5:30 a.m., the vault was open. The team loaded the jewels into large duffel bags. Everything had been executed with extreme precision, and that's what had taken them hours. They couldn't afford a single mistake. After the heist, each member took a different exit route. Leonardo drove away in a car while the others escaped, on foot. The stolen gems were to be laundered through an Italian diamond trader. The gang had spent nearly 18 months preparing, leaving investigators baffled at how anyone could have breached such a secure vault without sounding a single alarm. Their downfall came days later, ironically, because of one mistake. Speed, nervous, and overwhelmed by the magnitude of their crime, panicked. He and another member named Maganad drove to a forest in France to destroy evidence. But Speed in his panic failed to completely burn the trash. Instead, he buried much of it in the soil. Leonardo, meanwhile, was busy disposing of his own share of evidence when he noticed Speed hadn't completed the task. But with daylight approaching, they had to flee the forest quickly and decided to take the risk. Unfortunately for them, the forest land belonged to a local farmer. The next day, the farmer noticed the trash and, thinking kids had been playing a prank, began cleaning it up. Among the debris, he found papers marked Antwerp Diamond Center and immediately alerted the police. That was all it took. The police traced a sandwich receipt found in the trash to a local grocery store and used security footage to identify Leonardo. He was arrested at his sports club. Among the evidence recovered were broken vault boxes, tools, and remnants of security camera equipment that had been stolen to erase their presence. The vault had been meticulously breached, steel boxes ripped open, many protected by complex Amazon locks and copper-based alloys. Leonardo was convicted as the mastermind and dubbed the Italian job's last godfather. In 2005, a Belgian court sentenced him to 10 years in prison. He was released on parole in 2009. However, in 2011, a European arrest warrant was issued for violating parole conditions, specifically failing to repay losses to the victims, which had been part of his parole terms. In 2013, Leonardo was arrested, again at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris while returning from the US, and was sent back to serve the remainder of his sentence. And to this day, the diamonds remain missing. It was a humid, moonless night, August 18, 2017. The narrow streets of Toledo, Spain lay blanketed in quiet, the occasional hum of a motorbike or clink of a bottle the only signs of life. Inside the historic Royal Mint, buried beneath centuries-old stone and silence, something stirred. On the surface, it looked like routine night security. 2 guards walked their designated rounds, checking the empty printing halls and storage wings. But underneath the vault floor, something very different was happening. 6 people moved silently through a storm drain that ran beneath the Mint's west wing. They weren't just criminals, they were soldiers of sorts, trained, rehearsed, each with a background as sharp as a blade. Rio, the youngest, a tech prodigy expelled from university for hacking into Spain's tax records. Tokyo, an ex-soldier turned fugitive. Nairobi, a brilliant counterfeiter. Denver, a street fighter from Valencia. Helsinki and Oslo, war veterans from the Balkans. They were led by the professor, Sergio Marquina, whose voice echoed through their hidden earpieces. Calm, calculated, almost fatherly. Breathe. You're right on schedule. It wasn't a smash and grab. It was an invasion, an occupation. Their plan wasn't to steal printed money. It was to print their own. 3 hours earlier, they'd entered through a maintenance tunnel that hadn't been used since the Franco era. The floor tiles had been lifted and replaced with fiberglass imitations months ago by a shell company run by the professor. Everything had been prepped. The plan was airtight, or so it seemed. It all started to unravel when Arturo Roman, the Mint's director, slipped out of the hostage group during a bathroom break. He found an old walkie-talkie in the maintenance wing, one left behind in a janitor's closet. He managed to get through to a nearby transit officer. That call changed everything. Suddenly, they weren't invisible anymore. Police moved in. Helicopters circled. Floodlights bathed the perimeter in harsh white. But this wasn't what made the heist turn horrifying. It was the night of day 2. A body was discovered. Monica Gaztambide, Arturo's secretary, hadn't checked in with the hostages during morning roll call. Her absence was chalked up to stress. She was pregnant after all. but Nairobi insisted on a full sweep. They found her behind a stack of printing pallets in the sub-basement, throat slit, blood soaked into her blouse and pooled across the concrete, like black ink. There were no signs of forced entry, no breach, which meant one thing: her killer was among them. The professor, who'd been monitoring all surveillance feeds remotely, froze. Check every door, rescan the perimeter. No one gets in or out. Panic began to spread through the group, not among the hostages, but the crew. Tokyo's voice came through the earpiece, low and shaken. This wasn't part of the plan. Inside the vault, Rio broke protocol and started crying. He had known Monica, had even flirted with her. She wouldn't have tried to escape. Someone's messing with us. But Nairobi shut him down. Pull it together. We've come too far to let paranoia kill us. What they didn't know, what even the professor didn't realize, was that one of the hostages was not who they claimed to be. A man named Lucas Aranda had slipped into the Mint just before lockdown, posing as a visiting bank liaison. But Lucas wasn't a banker. He was a freelance mercenary, ex-Foreign Legion, paid by someone who wanted the heist to fail, someone who wanted to make a statement that no one could outsmart the Spanish state. He'd been watching, listening, waiting for the perfect moment. The murder was just the beginning. Over the next 2 nights, lights flickered, power systems glitched, surveillance feeds looped, blacked out, and returned without explanation. Oslo, once a mountain of calm, began to spiral. He claimed he saw someone outside the vault, someone wearing a Salvador Dalí mask, but the entire team had checked in. No one was missing. I swear he looked right at me. His head, it was tilted, wrong, like it wasn't attached right. The team dismissed it as exhaustion. But then Oslo went missing. His body was found in the air duct, crammed between 2 bulkheads like a forgotten doll. Neck snapped. No one heard a thing. That night, Denver refused to sleep. He sat by the vault entrance with a shotgun across his knees and whispered to Nairobi, "We thought we were the predators in here. We're not. There's something else, someone else inside." The professor, losing control, issued a lockdown within the lockdown. No one leaves. No more printing. We find the killer. That's when Tokyo made a terrifying discovery. She reviewed the hostage list, cross-referenced it against ID photos gathered from their security files. There were 58 names, but only 57 verified employees. The extra man was Lucas. But by then he was already gone. They found his makeshift quarters behind a false panel in the engineering room. Inside, maps, photos of every crew member, printed emails between museum donors and government officials, clues that this wasn't just about money, it was about leverage and revenge. Lucas had once been contracted to provide security during a government cover-up in the financial sector. When he spoke out, he was blacklisted, his unit disbanded. His wife, a whistleblower, had disappeared in police custody. He had nothing left. Now he wanted the world to suffer with him. The professor, desperate to salvage the operation, ordered an early escape. But the plan had rotted. Lucas had cut the tunnel wires, planted C4 on the west exit, disabled half their oxygen supply. The only way out now was through the front doors. As the police finally breached the perimeter on day 8, the place was a tomb, blood on the walls. 4 dead, including Oslo, Monica, and a young hostage who tried to run. Lucas was never found. Some believe he escaped in a maintenance van the same night the team tried to blast their way out. Others think he never existed at all, that he was a ghost or a fiction born of fear. The few survivors, Tokyo, Denver, Nairobi, never spoke publicly. Their testimonies were sealed under national security orders, but whispers persist. The Royal Mint still bears the scars of that week, and every now and then a night guard swears they hear footsteps in the sub-basement or find a Salvador Dalí mask, old, weathered, left on a crate, as if someone never quite left. They say it was the most brilliant heist in European history, not just for what was taken, but for how it unfolded like a psychological thriller. No cinematic flair, no Mission Impossible antics, just cold patience, grit, and a darkness that went deeper than the vault they cracked. The crime scene, Antwerp Diamond Center, Belgium. February 15th, 2003. A fortress built on 2 levels underground, fortified with seismic detectors, Doppler radar, a magnetic field, infrared motion sensors, and locks with over 100 million combinations. But somehow 5 men stepped inside undetected and vanished into the night with over $100 million in loot. It wasn't magic. It was Leonardo. Leonardo Notarbartolo, 51, was a small-time Italian hustler with slicked-back gray hair, expensive, taste and a grin that could cut glass. He'd posed as a diamond merchant for almost 2 years, renting office space inside the very building he planned to rob. He'd nod to the guards every morning, bring croissants, talk about football. A good guy, the kind that never raises suspicion. But Leo wasn't working alone. His crew didn't use code names like the Monster or the Genius. That was just press garbage. These were men with pasts, debts, prison scars, and ghosts. Salvatore, the Wire man, had lost his family to a gas explosion caused by faulty wiring. He never trusted electricity after that, which made him damn good at understanding it. He could hear it breathe. Paolo, the locksmith, had hands so steady they seemed robotic. He once broke into a safe underwater. Carlo, their getaway man, was a washed-up Formula 3 driver with shaky hands and a Vicodin habit. And then there was Marcello, the silent one. No one knew where Leo found him. He didn't speak much. But when he did, it wasn't friendly. The plan started in silence with cold rehearsals. A warehouse outside Turin had been converted into a replica vault. They studied footage, timing, pressure sensors, floor vibrations, and even the guards' cigarette breaks. But there was a problem. The motion sensors. If triggered, everything burned. So Leo got creative. On Valentine's Day, he entered the vault's hallway as usual. This time, he sprayed a fine mist of oil-based hair product, L'Oreal, strong, hold, across the motion sensors. The oily film distorted infrared detection for a few hours. He smiled at the security guard on his way out. "Happy Valentine's," he joked. By midnight, Carlo had the van waiting 2 blocks away, idling, hood cold, license plate covered in fresh mud. The others slipped through a side entrance Leo had unlocked earlier, using a duplicate key he made from a mold. No alarms. No sound. They moved like surgeons. Carlo blacked out the rooftop infrared sensor with a heat-resistant polyester tarp he'd stitched in his apartment. Salvatore climbed the balcony, cut the external alarm, then placed dinner plates spray-painted matte black over the cameras. Paolo used a magnetic field stabilizer, a rig of aluminum strips and duct tape to bypass the magnetic field alarm. He'd practiced this move hundreds of times. The key, the vault's real key, was the wild card, a foot long and unique. It had been left hanging behind a staff bathroom door weeks earlier. Paolo had seen it once, that was enough. He sketched it blind on a napkin in the building's cafeteria, built a replica using brass and carbon filings. No one thought it would work. It did. Click. Inside the vault, 123 deposit boxes lined the walls. They didn't smash anything. Foam pads, muffled drills. Marcello used a crowbar wrapped in microfiber cloth. Gold bars were packed like bricks, loose diamonds scooped like rice into velvet sacks. Antique heirlooms, platinum-studded watches, uncut gems. It was an orgy of wealth. But then something went wrong. Paolo froze. One of the deposit boxes, 81, was welded shut from the inside, sealed with a tamper-proof copper alloy. Not part of the plan. Leo knelt beside it. "This wasn't in the mock-up," he hissed. Marcello moved in. His fingers traced the box. Then he pulled out a flat chisel from his belt. "No. We're out of time," Leo said. Marcello didn't stop. He wedged it in, and Popped the lock. Inside? Not diamonds, not cash, just a velvet pouch. When Leo opened it, his face changed. "What is it?" Paolo whispered. Leo closed the pouch. "We don't take this one," he muttered. But Marcello stared at him. Hard. No one said a word. Then Leo tucked the pouch into his coat. By 5 a.m., they were gone. The vault was sealed, wires repaired, the hallway sprayed down. The hidden camera in the ceiling fixture, used to watch guards punch in codes, was pulled and destroyed. The fire extinguisher with the transmitter? Buried under 6 feet of concrete back in Italy. They got away. But 3 days later, a farmer, cleaning out his woodshed near Lille, France, found half-burned trash, a sandwich wrapper, camera parts, torn electrical schematics, and a slip of paper, smudged but legible. Box 81. The wrapper had a store logo. The store had a camera. Police traced it. Leo was arrested at a golf club in Turin sipping espresso. But when Belgian detectives raided his apartment, they found only $1 million in stones. The rest? Gone. Marcello vanished. No border crossings, no bank activity, no family, contacts. Some say he took the velvet pouch and ran. Others say Leo never let it go. The pouch, it turns out, contained something never officially listed in the police report. A set of rare blue diamonds, non-commercial, undeclared, and likely tied to conflict zones, worth more than the rest combined, and cursed, some whispered. In the months that followed, strange things happened. Paolo was found in a Naples apartment, dead from carbon monoxide poisoning. Suicide, they said. Salvatore overdosed in an abandoned warehouse, surrounded by burnt electrical wires. Carlo? His car was discovered in a river. No body, only Leo remained. He served 8 years, got out, got arrested again for violating parole. He never talked. And as for Marcello? An urban legend persists in the Antwerp underground. A man with no fingerprints, eyes like obsidian, who visits black market jewelers with stones so pure they make dealers cry. But no proof. Just whispers. The vault has since been reinforced. The AIT locks replaced, the staff doubled. But if you talk to the old guards who were there that night, they'll tell you the same thing. It wasn't just a theft. Something else got taken. Something they were never supposed to touch.